On a bright sunny day, Emily, a kind-hearted lady, helped a sick elderly man by buying him medicines. She brought him home and cared for him, never thinking twice about it. Little did she know, her simple act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never imagine. The next morning, as she opened the door, she stood frozen in surprise. In front of her was a wealthy, professional chef, with an assistant by his side. Life was about to surprise her in the most unexpected way. Hello everyone, welcome to Narrative Whispers. Today I'm going to share a heartwarming story about kindness, hope, and unexpected blessings. So let's dive into it. The morning sun gently entered the room, lighting up Emily's face. She slowly opened her eyes. Today her heart felt lighter, her face brighter. It had been a long time since she'd woken up feeling this way. She turned to the small bedside table and picked up a photo frame. Holding it close, she smiled softly. "I wish you were here," she whispered, her voice trembling. A tear rolled down her cheek as she kissed the picture. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory fill her heart, then carefully placed the frame back. Emily stood up and walked to the mirror. "Today's the day," she said to herself, her voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. For the past 4 months, she had been saving every single coin, every little bit she could spare. All of it was for one thing: to buy a small pastry from the cake shop just a few streets away. To others, it was just a piece of cake, a simple treat. But for Emily, it was far from ordinary. She washed her face and got ready, her heart beating a little faster. As she stepped out of the house, the world outside seemed so ordinary. Birds chirping, children playing, the hum of traffic. But for Emily, this day was something which either could calm her heart or tear her apart. The cake shop, Sugar Blossom, was the only place in town which sells the specific cake she was waiting so eagerly to buy. As she stepped out of her house, each footstep felt heavier, her emotions tangled in a whirlwind of hope, nervousness, and excitement. When she finally reached the cake shop, she stopped for a moment outside the gate. She glanced up at the familiar sign, Sugar Blossom, and a rush of emotions filled her. She could almost feel the warmth of the place and the sweet aroma in the air, just as it had always been. She stepped inside, and the same comforting smell wrapped around her like an old friend. The atmosphere was just as she remembered. She waited her turn, her heart pounding in her chest. When it was finally her turn, she looked up at the counterman, her voice soft. "I'd like a piece of the caramel delight, please." The counterman paused, his face turning serious. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone gentle. "The recipe for the caramel delight, it's no longer available. The head chef who made it, he resigned last year. He was the only one who knew how to make it." Emily's heart sank. "We have other cakes," he offered. "Would you like something else?" "No," Emily replied, her voice barely a whisper. She turned away quickly, her chest tight, her eyes already filling with tears. Outside, the world seemed to blur around her. She walked, but her steps felt heavy, each one harder than the last. The tears couldn't stop. "Nothing is left now, not even the cake." She put her hands on her face, trying to hold herself together. "Keep it together, Emily, keep it together!" Her voice echoed in her head, but her heart couldn't stop breaking. She walked back home, her steps slow and defeated. As Emily made her way home, her heart heavy with the weight of her failed visit to the cake shop, she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. An elderly man was walking slowly along the street when suddenly he stumbled and fell to the ground. His legs gave way and he couldn't stand properly. Without thinking, Emily rushed over to him. Her heart raced, and she immediately bent down to help him up. She supported him, guiding him to a nearby footpath since there was no bench around. The man was so weak, he was shivering despite the weather not being cold. Emily felt his body temperature as she helped him stand, and her heart sank. "He has a high fever," she thought. She gently spoke to him, trying to get him to respond. "Sir, you have a high fever. Are you okay?" She kept a respectful distance, worried that he might be feeling uncomfortable. The old man hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. "I am fine. Don't trouble yourself, he mumbled, trying to refuse help. But Emily knew he couldn't go on like this. He was dangerously unwell, and if he didn't get medicine soon, things could get worse. She looked at him with concern. "Please, stay here, I'll be right back," she said, her voice firm yet caring. Without giving it another thought, Emily rushed to the nearby chemist. She didn't hesitate for a moment, even though it meant spending the money she had saved so carefully over the past few months and had gone through a lot. For her, this was more important than anything else. Helping someone, caring for someone's precious piece of life. She returned quickly, carrying fever medicine and cold remedies. She knelt beside the elderly man, her face full of determination. "Here, take these. They'll help." The old man hesitated, his frail hands trembling as he reached for the medicine Emily had brought. He looked into her eyes, uncertain at first, but then saw something there, genuine kindness, a heart full of care. Slowly he took the medicine from her, his hands shaking. Emily smiled softly, relieved that he agreed to take it. But her worry wasn't over. The medicine alone wouldn't be enough. He needed rest, a proper place to lie down. "Sir," she said gently, "the medicine won't do much if you don't rest. You need to take it seriously, or the fever will keep coming back." The old man shook his head weakly. "No, it's fine. Thank you for the medicine. I can manage from here." Emily couldn't leave him like this. She saw how badly he was shivering, his body still too weak. She couldn't bear to see him suffer alone. "If you want," she said softly, "I can drop you home. It's no trouble at all." The old man looked up at her, his eyes filled with disbelief, as if he couldn't understand why someone would offer such kindness. He looked down again, his voice barely audible. "What's your name?" "Emily, sir," she replied. "I'm grateful, Emily, but I don't have a home." Emily's heart sank as she heard those words. She felt a sharp ache in her chest, but she quickly shook it off. There was no way she could leave him helpless. "If you'd like," she said, her voice steady, "you can come to my place and rest there. You can leave whenever you feel better." The old man thought for a moment, his weary eyes studying her face. Emily's kindness and warmth seemed genuine, and for the first time he allowed himself to trust her. He wasn't feeling well enough to argue. After a long pause, he nodded, his voice weak but grateful. "All right, I'll come." Emily's face lit up with relief. She helped him to his feet carefully, supporting him as they walked together. As they moved down the street, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of peace, knowing that she was able to offer a little comfort to someone in need. She brought the elderly man into her home, and with great care she lit up the fireplace to provide him with warmth and comfort. The crackling fire filled the room with a soft glow as the man settled into a chair. He felt the peace of the home seep into his tired body, and soon enough sleep overtook him. Emily smiled quietly as she watched him drift off, his body finally at ease. She carefully left him to rest in the living room and slipped away to her room, her heart lightened by knowing he was better. Some time passed. The old man slowly woke up, feeling surprisingly better. The warmth from the fire had eased his body, and for the first time in a while, he felt something resembling peace. As he stretched, he couldn't help but notice his surroundings. Emily's house wasn't in the best shape. The walls seemed to have gone weeks without being cleaned, and the ceiling dripped with moisture. Yet, despite all of this, Emily had never hesitated to help him. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the doorbell ringing. The old man slowly made his way to the door and opened it. A man stood there holding an envelope in his hand. "Is Emily here?" the man asked. The old man nodded, still a little disoriented. The man handed him the envelope, his face cold and businesslike. "This is the third warning from the court. The loan must be paid immediately, or this house will be taken as collateral." The words hit the old man like a heavy blow. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. As the man turned and walked away, the old man closed the door behind him slowly, his heart sinking. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the envelope in his hands, trying to process the message. Emily walked into the room, noticing the stillness between the old man and the envelope in his hands. She had hoped to break the silence, but as soon as she entered, she could see that something was wrong. His face was pale, his expression deep with concern. "Sorry, sir, I was using the restroom. Thanks for opening the door," Emily said, her voice light, though her worry began to rise. The old man looked at her, still holding the envelope, and finally spoke, his voice shaky. I'm good. This is for you." Emily's heart sank as she noticed the envelope. She tried to remain calm, but the heavy silence between them was undeniable. She took the envelope from his hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she held it. The old man, looking at her with kind eyes, broke the silence. "You're just like my daughter, Emily. You've done so much for me today. Can I ask you something personal?" Emily, surprised by his words, hesitated for a moment, but then nodded gently. "Sure, sir." The old man seemed to gather his thoughts, his voice growing softer. "I'm aware of your situation, and the man who handed me the envelope confirmed it. You're not doing very well yourself. Despite that, you decided to buy me medicine and bring me into your home. Why would you do that? Why would anyone do that?" Emily stood still for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected him to ask her something so personal. She hesitated, a nervous smile tugging at her lips, and then tears began to form in her eyes. She tried to hold them back, but they came in full force. The emotion was overwhelming, and she struggled to speak through her sobs. "No, sir, it's just, I wanted to help you," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't expect anything in return. If I can, and if I can afford it, I want to help people. Maybe it can save their day. Because I have nothing more left apart from that." The room grew heavy with the weight of her words, and the old man stood quietly, watching her. He could see the pain in her eyes, the vulnerability she was showing, and for a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The old man, with a soft, regretful sigh, looked at Emily. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked you that." But Emily, with a sense of respect and understanding, interrupted him gently. "No, sir. It's completely all right," she said, her voice cracking slightly. It's just my daughter." The old man noticed how Emily's emotions seemed to shift, how her face softened with pain as she tried to steady herself. She was diagnosed with cancer," Emily continued, her voice trembling. "She was just 4. The words seemed to hang heavy in the air, and for a moment, Emily could barely speak. She looked down, trying to steady her emotions, but it was clear the wound was still fresh, still raw. Her voice cracked as she continued, her words barely a whisper. "Being a single mother, I tried everything. I put my every precious thing into saving her. But her condition kept getting worse, and 6 months ago I lost her. I couldn't save her." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, but the weight of her grief hung in the room. "She was everything I had," Emily whispered. "And now, after she's gone, I have no purpose." The old man looked at her, his heart aching for this woman who had given everything for a child she could never have back. He could feel her pain as if it was his own. Emily continued, her voice steadying but still filled with sorrow. "I do food deliveries for a living, trying to pay back the loans I've taken. But even that, sometimes I wonder if it's enough. If anything is—" The old man stood still, unable to speak for a moment, his heart heavy with emotion. Emily's words had touched a deep place in him. He looked at her with a mixture of admiration and sorrow, unable to comprehend how someone could endure such a loss, yet still carry on with such kindness. The old man, his voice trembling, finally spoke. "You could have used that money to pay for your loan," he said, still in disbelief. "And despite everything, you considered buying me medicines a better decision?" Emily smiled softly, her eyes gentle but filled with a quiet sadness. She shook her head, trying to hold back the tears. "That money was no longer valuable to me by that time, sir," she said. "I couldn't have used it better than to help you. The old man looked at her, surprised by her unwavering resolve. "Why do you say that?" he asked, a hint of curiosity mixed with confusion. Emily let out a small sigh, the weight of the story she was about to share hanging in the air. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "I had saved that money to buy a piece of cake. Caramel Delight," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It was my daughter's favorite. She loved to eat it." Her gaze dropped to the floor, as if trying to find strength in the moment. It's her birthday tomorrow," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "I wanted to feel her joy, her soulful happiness, the way she used to feel when she was around me. I wanted to feel close to her again." A tear slipped down Emily's cheek, and she wiped it away quickly. "But the cake, it wasn't available," Emily continued, her voice heavy with grief. "The chef who used to bake it resigned from his job, and so his recipe isn't available anymore." She let out a deep sigh, her chest tight with the weight of the emotions she was carrying. "I couldn't use that money, the same money I had set aside to celebrate my daughter's existence, to pay for the burdens of my own." She paused, her voice trembling with conviction. "How could I call myself a mother then?" The old man's eyes filled with tears as he heard her words. He was heartbroken. All of a sudden, he realized the name of the cake. He repeated, his voice filled with surprise, "Did you say Caramel Delight? Your daughter really loved that?" Emily, confused, nodded. "Yes, sir." Silence filled the room for a moment. The old man, his eyes filled with emotion, respectfully stepped a little closer to Emily. "God bless you," he exclaimed. "You've endured so much pain, and you've made me realize more than I expected, dear. I must leave now." Emily, still confused, tried to ask, "Sir? Is everything all right? Why are you leaving all of a sudden?" The old man turned around, smiled, and left, leaving Emily in a mix of emotions, unsure, surprised, and filled with questions. The next day, doorbell rang, and Emily, expecting another court warning or someone chasing after her for money, opened the door. She was stunned. Emily didn't immediately recognize. Standing there was the same old man from yesterday with a young man, but this time he was wearing a professional chef's uniform. This was the same man who had been unable to afford the medicines and had claimed not to have a home the day before. Yet now, here he stood in professional clothing, with assistants at his side. "Sir, is it really you?" Emily asked, still in disbelief. "How is this possible?" The old man smiled warmly. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, his voice filled with respect and regret. "I realized something late, but you made me understand that everything happens for a reason." He continued, "I used to be the head chef, the one who created the recipe for the Caramel Delight cake that your daughter loved. After some food critics gave my cake a very bad review, I became infamous. Full of regrets, I resigned from my job and I fell into a deep depression. I did have a home, but when I told you yesterday that I had no home, what I meant was that the person I had become didn't deserve the luxuries of a home. I had lost my self-worth." Emily listened, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "But when I learned that a mother wanted to buy my cake for her daughter and couldn't, I realized the value of my cooking. I saw that what I create can truly impact people's lives more than I ever realized," the old man continued. He smiled gently. "So today, Emily, I'm here to celebrate your daughter's birthday with you, and I'll make the Caramel Delight cake myself, at your house." Emily's eyes widened with surprise, touched by his gesture. The young assistant began bringing in the ingredients for the cake, and Emily didn't know that her simple act of kindness could lead to such an extraordinary turn of events. As they celebrated the birthday, laughter and warmth filling the house, the old man handed Emily an envelope. She opened it and saw a check inside, a check for more money than she had ever dreamed of. She hesitated, unable to believe what she was seeing. "I can't accept this," she said softly, her heart conflicted. But the old man insisted. "You've given me more than you know, Emily. This is for you." Emily took the check, her hands trembling. The old man smiled kindly. "I'm going to make amazing cakes, and I'll spread my recipes worldwide so no one will ever be limited in their ability to enjoy my creations. And you, Emily, you've helped me find my purpose again." With that, he left, his heart restored and his soul lighter. Emily stood by the door, tears rolling down her cheeks. The weight of the moment overwhelmed her as she realized how her kindness had led to something beautiful, a future where she could pay off her loans, save her home, and keep the memories of her daughter alive. "Thank you," she whispered softly, her voice filled with gratitude, as the old man disappeared from view. Thank you for listening to Emily's story, a story of kindness, resilience, and life's unexpected miracles. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves compassionate and inspiring tales. See you in the next story on Narrative Whispers.